To our next story, as you can see on the screen, complete 180 talking about the possible origins for life in our galaxy or our solar system, I mean, and particularly our planet, whether we can use a certain technology to transport life to a different piece or a different place in our galaxy. I mean, all the different stuff surrounding that and my fascination with this topic. Let's continue on the trend of creating life. Artificial wombs. I mean, something I did not expect to see, but a story that caught my attention and something that I think is important to talk about. FDA committee meets to discuss artificial wombs. A committee of advisors to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration met this week to discuss artificial womb technology and the possibilities for clinical trials for humans. The hope is that one day the technology could be used not to replace human wombs, but to increase the chances that extremely premature babies could survive. Important thing to note. The Pediatric Advisory Committee spent 2 days discussing development plans for establishing regulations, ethical considerations, and the effectiveness of artificial womb technology devices, along with guidelines for the first studies in humans. Similar devices had been used in preterm animals, and researchers say they could ultimately help solve a major health problem experienced around the world. So, good things. Preterm births, when a baby is born before 37 weeks of pregnancy, are a growing problem in the US. The preterm birth rate rose 4% in 2021 from 10.1% in 2020 to 10.5% in 2021, the CDC says. Preterm birth complications are the leading cause of death among children under 5 years of age, responsible for approximately 900,000 deaths in 2019, according to the World Health Organization. Yikes. The CDC says babies born too early have higher rates of death and disability. While babies who survive may have breathing problems, feeding difficulties, cerebral palsy, developmental delay, vision problems, and hearing problems, the use of an artificial womb, complete with synthetic amniotic fluid, could allow preterm babies more time to grow and develop, reducing the chances of death or disability. The device would be used as alternative to current standard of care management of extremely premature infants in the neonatal intensive care unit. The FDA stressed that advisory committees provide independent expert advice on broad scientific topics to help the agency make sound decisions based on the available science. Advisory committees make non-binding recommendations to the FDA, which generally follows the recommendations but is not legally bound to do so. So, if you were to read the headline of this, they're making artificial wombs. Oh my, it's the Matrix, it's all of a sudden, it's all of these bad things that obviously first come to your mind when this topic is discussed. But as you read a little bit further, there might actually be a good use to this. So let's go to the FDA Pediatric Advisory Committee meeting announcement September 19th through 20th, 2023. So it talks about boom, boom, boom. All right, here is the agenda. The meeting presentations will be heard, viewed, captioned, and recorded through an online teleconferencing platform. On September 19th, the Pediatric Advisory Committee will meet to discuss the appropriate development plans for establishing safety and effectiveness of artificial womb technology devices, including regulatory and ethical considerations for first in human studies. The discussions will be limited to the use of AWT as an alternative to current standard of care management of extremely premature infants in the neonatal intensive care unit. So now I have not seen what other people have said, if other people have even heard of this story, but I do think that it is important to say that most likely, I mean, maybe there's a chance, but most likely they're not doing this so that they can get rid of women and they can just start creating babies out of nothing. They can start these factories where they create super soldiers, where they could have mini Dolph Lundgrens running around, Sylvester Stallone's, whatever action figure you want to think of. They don't have those guys running around. I don't think that's what they're trying to do. I really truly believe. Now it could be duped. I could be wrong. They could be using this for those reasons to create super soldiers, but I will have to take them at their word that this is going to be used for premature babies. You put them into this artificial womb, and this helps to carry them on through their journey. All right. Public participation. All right. Yeah, so this is a whole bunch of stuff, but let's go right here, artificial. And then we have, I have Carmella once again, as we talked about last week. Tennis ball time. So over here looking beautiful. She's getting very big. And a bad throw by the ball by me, but she is getting very big. She's almost about 1 year old. So we might be exactly a month. I think exactly a month, September 27th. Exactly a month from her first birthday, where she turns a full 12 months. So let's see if I can. She has been very good during this podcast, though. Sometimes I don't know if you people, if the listeners or the viewers see all the jump cuts that I make, but sometimes she whines and she has to go to the bathroom and stuff. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult to record these, but she is, I mean, just beautiful. So I have to put up with it just because she's the best dog ever. Anywho, let's continue to look into these artificial wombs right here. Yeah. Right here. Your privacy. Give me all the cookies. Come on. So they're going to start these clinical trials. What the? All right. According to public data, preterm lambs have survived for up to 4 weeks in an artificial womb. Very, very cool. So they're already using this for non-human. I mean, they've done even cloning. I remember this was a story in, I believe, middle school for me, where they were cloning things like goats and sheep and pigs and that stuff. I mean, now they're creating entire parts and stuff for people that they're putting inside of people that they use from animals and stuff like that. Like the technology of the medical field is really starting to accelerate and exponentially get more and more closer to being able to create almost entire humans, which I think is going to be a good for society. Because if you have somebody who is, let's take this example, a preterm a baby who is not fully developed, if you were able to in a lab help create certain organs or certain things that they would need that are fully developed that you could create on your own, and then later on somehow get inside of the baby, could help to create a healthy and, need I say, normal baby without any real health risks or health concerns, even if it is born premature, which I think is like the 900,000 in 2019, according to the WHO. I mean, this is a problem that affects almost a million, that affected almost a million people in 2019. All right, now let's get into this article. A hairless, pale-skinned lamb lies on its side in what appears to be an oversized sandwich bag filled with hazy fluid. Its eyes are closed and its snout and limbs jerk as if the animal, which is only about 3/4 of the way through its gestation period, is dreaming. The lamb was one of 8 in a 2017 artificial womb experiment carried out by researchers at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. When the team published its research in April that year, it released a video of the experiments that spread widely and captured imaginations for some, evoking science fiction fantasies of humans being conceived and grown entirely in a laboratory, which I think is what many people will imagine, like I said earlier. Think that is what ultimately is going to happen. Not saying that it couldn't. It very well could. It depends on who's in charge of this stuff. This could really get out of hand if not taken carefully enough. So I definitely don't want to speak on as if that point is just not 100% going to happen. I mean, it very well could be used for nefarious reasons. Now, the researchers at CHOP are seeking approval for the first human clinical trials of the device that they've been testing, named the Extrauterine Environment for Newborn Development, or EXTEND. The team has emphasized that the technology is not intended or able to support development from conception to birth. Important note there. Instead, the scientists hope that simulating some elements of a natural womb will increase survival and improve outcomes for extremely premature babies. In humans, that's anything earlier than 28 weeks of gestation, less than 70% of the way to full term, which is typically between 37 and 40 weeks. So we're not starting from week 1 and immediately plopping a little tiny fetus into one of these things and then taking them for there, or even taking the sperm and the egg, putting it into here and taking that entire cycle completely detached from a human mother's womb and just completely creating a basic human from just sperm and egg all the way through term for 37 to 40 weeks. It's not what this is for. The CHOP group has made bold predictions about the technology's potential. In another 2017 video describing the project, Alan Flake, a fetal surgeon at CHOP who has been leading the effort, said, "If it's as successful as we think it can be, ultimately the majority of pregnancies that are predicted at risk for extreme prematurity would be delivered early onto our system rather than being delivered premature onto a ventilator." In 2019, several members of the CHOP team joined a startup company, Vitara Biomedical in Philadelphia, which has since raised $100 million to develop Extend. All right. Let's continue on. Okay. In a natural womb, a fetus receives oxygen, nutrients, and antibodies and hormonal signals and gets rid of waste through the placenta, a transient organ which fetal blood interacts with maternal blood. Of these various roles, artificial womb technology is most focused on providing oxygen and removing carbon dioxide, replacing the mechanical ventilators that are often used for neonates. This can damage fragile developing lungs that would otherwise still be filled with amniotic fluid. The artificial womb would bridge a baby born extremely premature through those days and weeks when they're most at risk for lung and brain damage. The CHOP group has signaled that it would wean babies off its system after a few weeks when their organs are more fully developed and their likelihood of healthy survival is higher. The group system would work by placing extremely premature babies into what it calls a biobag filled with an electrolyte-laden fluid designed to mimic amniotic fluid. Surgeons would connect the blood vessels in the umbilical cord to a system that oxygenates blood outside the body. The fetal heart would still pump blood as it does in the natural womb. Yeah, this next one. I mean, this was my question after reading, would connect the blood vessels in the umbilical cord to a system. Okay, making the connection with blood vessels in the umbilical cord is difficult because the arteries are tiny and begin to contract as a baby is delivered. So surgeons will need to hook up the vessels to the system within minutes. Easier said than done. The process has got to be really slick, requiring deft surgical skills and speedy transitions, says Anna David, a maternal fetal specialist at University College London. And now they're doing this for lambs currently. And then you can kind of see right here, this is kind of what it looks like. Several groups are developing artificial womb technology to improve outcomes for extremely premature babies, but they take different approaches. Using fetal lambs as a model, a group at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor fills the lungs with fluid to protect them as they develop. Another group at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia submerges the entire fetus in artificial amniotic fluid. Interesting. So this top one is the University of Michigan. Blood from the jugular vein is pumped through an oxygenator and returned through the umbilical vein. Very cool. And then the second one is the image that we saw earlier. So it's a bag with artificial amniotic fluid, and then the fetal heart pumps blood through the umbilical arteries to the oxygenator and back through the umbilical vein. So kind of similar, but some major differences, as we can see here. Yeah, the Michigan device doesn't surround babies with fluid, but instead fills only their lungs through an endotracheal tube. And it uses a pump to draw blood from the jugular vein, oxygenate it outside the body, and send it back through the umbilical vein. The CHOP group hooks its device up to both the umbilical arteries and the vein. Each approach comes with pros and cons, obviously. Yeah, and then let's go further on and talk about ethical concerns. I mean, the number one thing people are going to be like, they're creating babies in a lab. They're going to create a army of folks. Can't see. I don't know what she's doing over here. Carmel, come here. Come say hi. Might be able to see her in the back. There she is. Popping up. Anyways, all right, ethics and more. Safety questions won't be the only ethical concerns. The development of artificial wombs represents a big transformational leap that solves lots of issues, says David, but she adds, it also opens up a whole new slew of issues. After the 27 study generated extensive media coverage, fears spread that artificial wombs could one day replace pregnancy. But researchers discount these concerns. This idea is so far in the distant future that it's not worth discussing its implications in relation to the current technology. I mean, so far in the future, but it's in the future. I mean, it still could happen. There still could be some issues with this. And I think that those issues are something that we should consider looking into. Those developing artificial wombs in the United States will also have to contend with a politically charged environment for reproductive rights. Flake and Michaeliska have been careful not to give any indication that an artificial womb would change the definition of fetal viability, which has enormous implications after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the 1973 landmark abortion decision, Roe v. Wade, in June last year. Previously, the 1937 ruling had protected abortion until the fetus is viable outside the womb. Interesting right there. Obviously, this is going to be a major political, and both sides kind of have their lines in the sand where they feel about abortion already. Maybe in the future I'll kind of talk about where I fall on that side of the aisle with that particular position, because there are many positions that I would agree that some sides get right, other sides get wrong, and that is both Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Socialist, Communist, whatever. They're a capitalist, whatever. There are many different things that I think all sides of pretty much every political ideology does get right and does get wrong. And I don't think that's a crazy statement to make. But this one, particularly when it comes to these artificial wombs, it's almost as if you know kind of what side's going to be maybe for it. Now, I don't know exactly, but the way this paragraph is framing it is almost as if you're like, okay, those who are against abortion are going to be against this. Those who are for abortion are going to be for this. Now, I would say that this is probably a good thing to have, because if this technology can be used to help babies who are potentially going to be premature births, which will have massive health outcomes and health consequences for those children, if this can potentially provide a natural birth or a birth of where they're fully developed, where they won't have any issues like that, then I think 100% this should be something that we invest time and money into. But I do want to read this again just so I'm not missing anything. Those developing artificial wombs in the United States will also have to contend with a politically charged environment for reproductive rights. These people have been careful not to give any indication that an artificial womb could change the definition of fetal viability. And now, what I think that's saying right there is, if you could take a baby at 20 weeks or something and put him in this artificial womb, then that changes the definition of viability, as opposed to it staying within the mother until that predicted time. If you could take a fetus from 2 weeks and take them outside of the womb and they're still viable, being that they're outside of the womb and they're in this device, could that potentially change the kind of time in, or the spot in the sand where exactly it is that a fetus becomes viable outside of the mother's womb? Not to say whether when life begins or any of those other implications that are spoken about in the abortion argument. This is particularly saying that viability of when the fetus is able to live outside of the mother's womb. What is that point? Is that at 6 weeks? Is that at 10 weeks? Is that at 20 weeks, 30 weeks, whatever it is? A lot of people draw their arguments and their opinions on abortion because of that particular distinction. All right. All right. Some researchers also worry that artificial wombs would represent an expensive technological solution to a deeper problem. Michael Harrison, a fetal surgeon at the University of California, San Francisco, sometimes called the father of fetal surgery, says the data he has seen so far have been promising, but he questions whether it's worth throwing all that money and tech on babies that have a poor likelihood of survival, instead of finding ways to improve pregnancy support or standard techniques for preterm critical care, which would reduce the need for artificial womb technology in the long run. David agrees, adding that there is insufficient research and funding to understand why women go into labor early and how to prevent it. We need to get real with this, she says. Artificial wombs will impact only a tiny fraction of the problem. Bartlett says that systemic measures are important, but he argues that better treatment is urgently needed for extremely preterm babies. A silver bullet that prevents prematurity doesn't exist, and it is unlikely to exist in our lifetimes. These technologies are what we need when the systemic measures fail. Okay. Okay. Very, very interesting. So, things to know, artificial womb benefits. Yeah. So I guess the main point here is that these wombs are thought to be introduced for the sole reason of helping the preterm babies. Now, there is some consequences. I mean, that viability thing is obviously, if these are a thing that is created and successful in these human trials that the FDA is testing and then brought to the market, and then you have corporations having facilities where they do stuff like this. I think overall, there are definitely some, I guess, political concerns of the viability of life and that argument and how that affects abortion debates and that kind of stuff. I'm a little bit more concerned with the actual act of saving the babies and the hopeful, I mean, overall good that this will do to our society, and hopefully we save a couple of babies. Although it will be expensive, there will probably have to be a lot more research done into this, and there will be mistakes along the way because us humans are flawed in many different ways. And um, I hope that this will not become a political issue, which it ultimately will be because we are dealing with something where it could potentially. I mean, the big thing for me was the viability debate, which is a hot topic issue, and if this has some kind of impact on that, then maybe we won't see this technology because the members of our government are too busy arguing over the ethics of this and whether this is the right thing, and that usually doesn't end in good things. It's not always the side who has the right opinion always gets their way, and that can be for a multitude of issues that have gone back in not just America's history but society as a whole.